Before America even entered World War II, it was clear that tensions were high between the United States and Japan. The two nations had been at odds with each other for quite some time due to a variety of reasons. Prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese-American relations had been constricted for years. Reasons for this include the belief that Western powers were hostile to Japan. America knew this, and it led to problems arising within their relationship. The Japanese believed they were looked at as inferior. The relationship was also strained because the U.S. opposed Japanese expansion, and Japan's demands were not being achieved by diplomacy. The Americans believe they are better than us. We are unable to keep a steady relationship with them as long as they hold these opinions. The Americans are not complying with our demands. For these reasons, our relationship is constricted, shall remain that way, and will not be able to grow. Translated, Masakusa Nenba, March 5, 1938. After the attack at Pearl Harbor, the United States officially entered World War II and made many changes within the country in the efforts to make the country safer during the war. Norman Rockwell outlined what the Americans were fighting for by saying that there were 4 freedoms that Americans should be entitled to: freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom from worship, and freedom of speech. However, these essential freedoms were stripped away from all Japanese Americans throughout the country. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, and anyone of Japanese descent living in America was sent to live in an internment camp. The American government said that this was a security measure, because the Japanese Americans were waiting for some kind of signal from back home. However, absolutely no attempt was made on the part of the American government to distinguish between Japanese Americans who were loyal or disloyal. And furthermore, no attempt was made to distinguish between Japanese Americans who were legal citizens or illegal. On the West Coast specifically, there were 110,000 Japanese Americans forced to live in these internment camps, which can be likened to the much abhorred concentration camps of Nazi Germany. In the internment camps, living conditions were horrible, and only enough medical care was given to the people to prevent epidemics from breaking out. Unfortunately, but not surprisingly, there was also no attempt to make the internment camps comfortable. Robert Kashiwagi, a man who was forced into an internment camp as a young man, said, "The camp that I had to go to was Amachi in Colorado, and it hit 25 below zero. And one has to be very familiar how to live in areas of below zero, like 25 below, because you don't just grab the doorknobs without being careful. Otherwise, you leave all your skin on the doorknob." While Japanese Americans were forced into internment camps for fear of a security threat, German Americans and Italian Americans were not persecuted to the same degree. This is not to say that German Americans and Italian Americans should have been forced into internment camps, but instead to point out the fact that Japanese Americans were targeted on the basis of racism. Due to the fact that the Italian and German Americans were white, they were deemed as less of a threat to the national security of America. After the war, the American government was clear in admitting that they had made a mistake in forcing the Japanese Americans into internment camps. However, this does not undo what was done to them. They were stripped of their civil liberties and forced to live first as second-class citizens and then as enemies in their own country, neither of which should have happened in a society that values democracy. Any time that rights are being taken away from citizens of the United States, there is a setback in democracy. There was no reason to justify the internment and racist treatment of the Japanese Americans during World War II. Therefore, this time period was an unfortunate setback for democracy.